And I'm back. It's been like a whole 3 seconds since I've talked. So anyway, I am, as far as watercolor goes, I am trying to do something a little different. Again, I've been watching Enrico Marini with he actually uses acrylics, liquid acrylics. Um, but he starts with a light base coat and kind of builds up from there. But one of the things that he also does is keeps kind of a rim light around the edge on most stuff, usually on the right side, or excuse me, left side, because that's this side here, right? Um, so I want to try something like that. I'm also trying a bigger brush just to see how that kind of lays down. And I want to try a um, thinner quantity of paint. This is a recycled paper sketchbook, so it doesn't really hold the paint super well. And sometimes it gets a little finicky with the drying process, so I want to try something that I feel like maybe it's not going to work terribly well with this paper. I keep telling myself I should go buy some watercolor paper, but I'm not a fan of cold press paper and really toothy stuff, so I'm kind of being pokey about doing such a thing. So that's a little thicker. This is a synthetic brush, and it's not really holding a lot of paint or water. So learning as we go. Yeah, see, it's already bubbling up a little bit more than I really can use. I've considered trying colored inks. Being that I've used ink, black ink, and drawn that way for decades now. That makes sense on one level, but I've never used colored ink beyond like in a pen. Let's see if I can wedge this in. Shaky, 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 shaky hands. So I don't know how well. I guess I've used white ink. I don't know how well that will work for what I'm aiming for. One of the biggest issues with the watercolor specifically is that it's this brand anyways is very transient, and when you go to layer on top, it tends to shove that bottom layer out or diminish it quite a bit. And I don't know, this is these are a set of Pentel artist something or other watercolors, and I got them because it was a set that had a palette that I thought worked really well, and I really enjoy the palette that it has. The particular color combination is very vibrant. For comics, we tend to lean towards those much brighter colors. I wouldn't think it would be a very good one for like landscaping or stuff like that, because like all the greens are pretty blasted out color wise. So but it works really nicely for me for what I want. And being that I'm pretty new to coloring watercolor, it has a lot of forgiveness because of the transient property of the colors. So I can kind of play with it a little bit more than I might with something like an ink or the acrylic paints that I started out with, because I was dabbling with that early on, just watering them way down and getting, pretty decent results that way. But it's just one of those things that it's all new territory for me, so I'm curious as to what might work the way I think it should. Like, one of the things I'm getting used to is trying to not, like, I can't white stuff out anymore, which is really where I'm where I'm at in my my drawing process is using a strong amount of whiteout, but um, you know, even with water-based white paint like this it's not very cooperative, and it just rolls off. Which is frustrating. Control Z, Control Z. That's thick. That's another thing I'm still kind of figuring out is the quantity of water to paint. Yeah, because, that's kind of how watercolors work. It's very much how watercolors work. So, I do tend to go pretty thick with the watercolors, with the paint. And I'm trying to get a little bit more what's the word? Lay it back a little bit more and let the colors carry it a little bit more. See, like here even, I've already accidentally put on 2 coats. And I don't know, it doesn't look bad. So, I just kind of got to work with it a little bit more. And I didn't put any purple down. Usually I put purple first. I am seriously running at the mouth today. I don't know why. Probably because I haven't done this in a few days, and I'm a little off my own schedule. I'm a lot off my own schedule. Anyway, so there's the first layer. I've kept that rim lighting around the outside, and it's developed a nice little bit of I don't know what the technical term for that is, but where it builds the paint up there and gives it a bit of a nice edge, watery edge, I guess. This looks like it's more or less dry. So this is just light yellow or light orange that I'm using right now. And normally what I'll do is I'll go in with the purple, let that dry, and just put that in just the shadowy areas, and then come back with the light orange and layer that on in one sheet. That's what I did here. And then, because this part I put on afterwards because I didn't have a shadow there, but here you can see there's purple underneath. Even here a little bit. And then on top of that, I go back with the brown and touch up some highlights. I don't want it to layer over top directly of the purple, but given that little bit of brown on top kind of gives it a complement, I guess. And the purple and the brown and the orange all work together in a way that multiplies the colors and the skin tone without blowing them out. So that is sort of my base technique. I think this is something I'm going to use if I want brighter sunlight, because it gives it that more, even just now on just the thin layer of oranges that I've put on. God, that really looks bad. It is just just a clean couple of layers. Sorry, I have my other brush in my mouth. That's a habit I have. Water in hand, brush in mouth. It's just kind of how I work. All right. I'm still working on drying. I'm getting to a comfortable place with the watercolors that I'm trying not to dabble with them too much. Because these, like I said, because these are so transient, you know, oftentimes when I'm trying to fix something, it just fucks it up worse. So that's where my inking skill set comes in. It's like, just leave it the hell alone, because it'll just get worse. So I think at this stage I'm going to leave the purple out, although I guess I could probably throw in some shadows. Question is, do I want to use purple or do I want to use blue? Because with the purple, it tends to brown out, and if I'm going for like a really strong sunlight, the blue probably, a low-key blue would probably work a little better with the orange. Let's see what we can do. I think I'm going to go with this, maybe with the midnight blue, or the ultramarine rather, and just super, super thin, and see how I can build it up, hopefully without fucking up the orange too badly. And then come back with the browns. So I think I'm going to, like here, maybe here, and then gradient. I'm kind of pulling back and then pulling the paint back off and then dabbing it on my towel I have here, just to clean it off my brush. That's pretty close. I probably, let's see, there. Kind of mute that a little bit. Definitely in the small of the back. Gradient. Gradient. Yeah, this is still kind of wet, I think. A bit in there. The orange is still pretty wet in here, so it's blending together a little faster than I would have guessed. Let's see, so that shadow is going to be cast on there. It's going to be a hard shadow here. That's a lot. That's another thing I'm still getting the hang of, is painting this way. It dries up and it kind of lightens up a bit. Like you can see here, it already is lightened up quite a bit. So, finding that balance of, and don't dabble with it too much. All right. Leave it. Just leave it. All right. Let's see, in the arm, I think right there, because it's going to cast a shadow back on the arm. And this needs to be gradient. shoulder blade. That one I'm alright with going a little heavy. Especially because all of this is going to kind of come together under the arm, under the shoulder blade. That's really heavy. Let's see, so cast shadow on this side, gradient there. I always have a lot of struggle with this part of the back because there's a lot going on, and trying to draw it in line is really tricky because there's a lot of surfaces that work against each other. Like there's a lot of various planes going on. So trying to find the right combination of tones there gets to be really tricky in line. It's not easy in paint either, but you know, in paint, in paint you can kind of hint at those things a little bit more, and in line, you just don't have the subtlety that sometimes you really need there. Side of the neck. Down that way, just a hint. That took off more than I wanted. I'm sure I'll come back in with some bits of maybe midnight blue and purple to just kind of tint things a little bit here and there. Not get overly playful with it, because that's when things start getting a little bit muddy, especially with this paint. I like that. This looks nice. That's more water. There it is. Paint. Cast there. Elbow. Problematic elbow. Ribs. How much reflection? Let's see. That's starting to get hungry. It's usually breakfast time about now. Almost 10 o'clock. It's a little early, but getting there. There's not a lot of cast light between the legs there, just because they're very close or against each other. Let's see, I think it's kind of abstracted. Blew it out a little bit much, but I think I can get it there. Alright. I think it's almost there. This one little spot. it's one of those things. It's like, okay, which side is going to be the heavier shadow? Is it going to be the side that's the legs are touching, or is it going to be the other side? And I guess that depends on how much atmospheric light there is. And okay, I think I'm just going to give it a little bit more right here, because as you can see, the blue is kind of shoving the orange out, and certain spots are kind of, the orange is getting a little overwhelmed by it. And the more I dab at it, the more that orange gets shoved. Which is why I usually do the purple first, because it doesn't get pushed as much, I guess. It doesn't, so. Let's see. Excuse me. I'm going to give that a second to dry some more. Actually, while I'm waiting, I could do the swimsuit. I forgot I need to do that. I forget, did I use Cobalt or Midnight? I think I used Cobalt. And I think that works pretty nicely, because it's a really vibrant blue. I did 2 passes. One was medium thin and the other one was fairly thick. So I think I might give it a little, a few more highlights. Move, damn it. Fuck it. It's watercolor. Sometimes you just gotta say fuck it and let it ride. Of course, if I was smart, I'd be like, hey, I should start with the large areas instead of trying to go into the little details, but I did not bring my smarts with me this morning, apparently. They're probably still in bed. I pull that highlight back out. I think I'm going to go there and then do all that. That's better. And then leave those highlights there for the second pass. It's still kind of a thought process I'm working on. That's white. This damn thing right here. Let's see if I can't pick that up a little bit. Nope. Figures. That for brown. Crease of the deltoid and the trapezius. If you are wondering how to get better at anatomy, I mean, obviously there's plenty of traditional routes like studying the drawing books, studying muscle magazines is one that a lot of comics artists suggest. I've actually done a significant amount of medical anatomy study. So I know the names of the muscles and most of the bones and whatnot. I'm sure I've forgotten some since then. So, you know, but, you know, the big muscle groups I understand. And that is, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways to learn to get, you know, a proper medical anatomy book. And it's fascinating to me because you get so much more information on, you know, like nervous systems and heart and so on and so forth, all the parts of the body. And I've learned a ton from that I just feel is really fascinating. And it's helped me appreciate the body more. Is this going to be dry enough? It's kind of an awkward brush to be doing gradients with. I probably ought to go get my other sable brush. That looks like shit. I'm just going to lay this down quickly and then pull the gradients back. At this point, what I'm aiming for is more of a form shadow situation, and highlights as well, and just being a little bit of a highlight to the rim light. And honestly, I'm probably getting kind of overdone here because it's more about complementing the orange than it is about shadow, and just getting the right spots. Yeah, this arm's kind of blown out and I can't really. That's why I do this in the sketchbook, because I just fuck that up all kinds of ways. This part I'm going to be a little heavier because it's on the bottom. It's less in the sun, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with it being a little darker. Let's try and round out that. I don't know. It could be worse. It could be worse. Let's be a little subtler in the hand. So this is regular brown, which I still feel is pretty sepia. Very, very red. But it works really nicely in the skin tones, especially on Idris. That's too much. Let's go that way a little bit. Damn. Yep, I really need to get a second brush. Alright, so as I move this way to her right arm, I'm probably going to not get so intense with some of these, because it's sort of a combination highlight shadow situation here. So I want it to pop some of that orange more. I want it to interact a little differently than the blue, because the blue is basically just straight shadow. I want it to complement the orange. I think I said that. I'm trying to leave just a little hint of orange there, and then the brown, if that works. I feel like this technique works a little better when the blue, and in this case blue, usually purple, the blue and the brown aren't layered directly on top of each other as much. So there, shoulder, armpit, we'll leave that blue, pull a little brown in there, pull there. Here. One of the things that took me a really long time to understand correctly is that the body is not round planes. It's a combination of flat planes and round planes. And those planes change dramatically depending on position, especially with a woman. Because, you know, as we bend and move, everything gets pushed and pulled. And while it's important to study the muscles, like I was telling you about, it's also important to understand how that fat layer, even on thin characters, you know, we all have some quantity of fat, and that works independently from the muscles. And, you know, the heavier set a given character is, the more independently that layer of fat works. And, you know, and that notion applies to things like breasts and bellies and just all of it. And so it's a different logic, I guess. Backsides even, you know, to try and draw that movement, that secondary movement, in a convincing way takes so much study and so much awareness, and it's very, very difficult. And I've noticed a lot of the comics artists, especially that I grew up with, just plain don't try to do that a lot. And